Hey guys, I've got a really important lesson for you just now. I'm going to share a game that I just played. My opponent's rated just over 1300, okay? And I'm going to take you through particularly the opening, because there's something really, really important with this, and we're looking at the initiative, having the initiative, getting the initiative in chess, and how that can sweep you through the whole game. Because in this game, my opponent plays an opening that I'm not too familiar with, a Caro-Kann, and but if you see the way that I play the opening, I get through my development and complete my development very quickly, and it's very solid. But I'm going to take you through really step by step, okay? And I get such a kind of advantage of initiative in this game that even though I go on to blunder a piece later in the middle of the game, it's not enough for my opponent to save himself. So let me take you through it, because it's a really good one, I think. So e4, and then c6 is played. Okay, so we're looking at the Caro-Kann. d4 makes sense. I'm occupying the center. Right, my opponent's offered me the center, so I'm going to take it. And now d5 is played. Now we have our first tension on the board. And white now needs to make a decision. So work through this with me, right? One thing which is tempting is to exchange. Okay, so you could capture the pawn and maybe pawn captures. Now we've both got a pawn in the middle of the board, although I've lost a central pawn and black has only lost a wing pawn. Okay, so that's one option. Another option could be I take the pawn, but maybe queen captures. And then look at the board. I've got one pawn on the board, right, out. And black has one pawn that's moved out, which would be on c6, and a queen that's moved out. So suddenly, black would have the initiative. Black would actually be slightly ahead in development. And it's as though we've swapped over, and now he's actually the white pieces, and I'm playing with the black pieces, okay? And it's really, really important to think about this in the first few moves of every game. So, what other alternatives are there? Well, a general principle that I really want you to remember, and I've been banging on about this in my recent videos, is if you can develop a piece, if you can do what you have to do, and develop a piece at the same time, that's generally a good idea. So what do I have to do here? Well, my pawn on e4 is unprotected. So the danger is pawn takes e4, and potentially then shores up his pawn, and I'm already down a pawn. So I can't have that. So the move that I play is knight to c3. Okay, and now let's say pawn takes, and I can recapture with a knight. And what have I got? I've got a pawn out and a knight in the middle of the board. Black would only have a pawn moved on the c file. Okay, so you've got to work out, figure out, calculate if this or if that, what's going to happen next, and which will give me the better position, which will give me the advantage in development, advantage in control of the board, etc. Okay, so knight to c3 is, for me, I think, a better move here. And now I think this is inaccurate on black's part. It is a known opening, it's probably a book move, it's called the Campomanes attack. But to me, this just seems to beg the move e5. So yes, I've used a move, another move, moving a pawn that I've already moved out into the board. However, it does a couple of things. First, it's a forcing move. It means that black now has to respond and move his knight. The other thing is, it takes away the f6 square for that knight. Okay, so black's probably going to want to castle kingside with the Caro-Kann. I can't imagine him wanting to put his queen there. Okay, and having a knight on f6 or f3, if you castle kingside, is generally a very good idea. It's a very natural square for the knight. Okay, so now the knight has to move, and where's it going to go? d7 would be in the way of the queen and the bishop and even the other knight, so that actually the other knight couldn't move, right, to any squares. That's no good. e4, I could exchange it off and double his pawns, and then have a very nice pair of pawns in the middle. That's another idea. He could come to here, but then that's easy to kick again. So I can just keep kicking him up the board, right? So in the end, he goes to e4. Now, I choose not to exchange off my knight. I've already invested a move, bringing that knight into the board. That knight now controls its maximum 8 squares. I don't want to get rid of my knight for no particularly good reason. So what I want to do now is I want to keep up the pressure on black and develop a piece. So what move can I play now that puts pressure on black and develops a minor piece? Remember, I don't want to move more than 2 pawns unless I have to. 2 pawns is the minimum that you have to move in order to get your bishops out into the board. But you don't want to be moving 4 or 5 pawns in the opening, because you could be using those moves to develop pieces, get into the board, get the initiative, get the control, get the upper hand. So, in fact, the move that I was thinking about probably comes later. So I develop my bishop now to d2, and the reason for that is if knight takes knight, I don't necessarily want to be forced to recapture with this pawn. I might like to keep my options open for casting queenside, right? And if the knight captures, I take back with the queen, and then look at the situation. The situation then will be black has two pawns out in the board. That's it. I would have pawn, pawn, knight, and queen off the back rank. Okay, so I'm like 2 moves in front of black at this point. Okay, so what black decides to do is a decent move. So he does the same thing. He is now protecting. He's adding a second defender to his knight and developing a piece at the same time. So I develop my knight, and what this is doing is it's defending this pawn. It's also developing a piece, obviously. And now pawn to e6 is played. Okay, so black's now got almost like a reverse London system set up with his light squared bishop outside of this light squared pawn structure. But he is still behind in development, right? He's just made a 3rd pawn move. I've already got 3 pieces out into the board compared to his 2, and it's my go. So now this is the move I was thinking of, bishop to d3. So think about it. This knight has made 2 moves. So it has had 2 turns of black's invested in its development. If black now decides to capture the knight or the bishop, then those moves have gone. So those 2 moves, in fact 3 moves that he's just played, have evaporated. So he's lost initiative. Whereas what have I done? I've used 1 move to get my knight out, or I've used 1 move to get my bishop out, right? And then let's say if knight takes knight, bishop recaptures. So that's a 2nd move. That's well, no, yeah. It means I've moved my bishop twice. If knight takes that, then queen captures, and you can see that I've saved moves, right? So this knight is almost like it's worth 2 opening tempi, 2 opening moves. If it captures, say, the bishop, it's had 3 opening moves. So it's used 3 of black's turns. Whereas that bishop would be, and for me to recapture, it would be 1 move to put the bishop on d2, and another move, say, to recapture with the queen. Okay, so it's only cost 2 moves. So black has lost. He's taken a step back in initiative if he does that. He does actually proceed to take the knight, right? So this knight has moved once and then been captured. His knight has moved 1, 2, 3 times with the capture, right? And now I actually decide to take back with the pawn, with my b pawn, rather than the bishop, and look at the situation. Just take a snapshot of this board now. 1, 2, 3 minor pieces out in the board compared to black's 1 minor piece, right? Black is already behind in this game. He's already losing in this game in terms of initiative. Right, so let's see how the game progresses. Now he moves his bishop back. Okay, so he's just used yet another move with that same piece. and now I castle. So now I have practically completed development, and black has 1, 2 minor pieces still on the back rank, queen still on the back rank, and the king is uncastled. Right? You can see the difference. This is the difference. This is how you wrestle getting the upper hand over your opponent in the first few moves of the game. And we're on move 9, and that's it. And this momentum that I have carries me forward even though I screw up in a moment. Okay, so bishop comes out. Okay, black's getting ready to castle. I move my rook across now, looking at b7, which is undefended. So now black has to do something to defend the pawn. Queen to c7. Now I move my f rook over to e1, because I've completed development now. This is absolutely essential. My development is done. Okay, I have some control of the board. I have ideas about exchanging off the bishops and making one of these pawns move already. I could think about moving my knight up the board. But here I'm thinking, okay, well, let's start to prepare an attack on the king side of the board. The king's going to be there when he castles. So why not prepare a rook lift? Centralize my rook, get it, start to maneuver around these pawns. And now black moves his final minor piece. Right? But it's not in a great place. I mean, where is this knight headed? It can't go there, can't go there, can't go there. Maybe this. Maybe that's a square for it. Okay? You can see how, because of his late and slow development now, black's control of the board is less than mine. So black's options are reduced. So black is playing with not a full deck right now. So now I decide, okay, I'm ready to start attacking now. I'm ready to start probing into black's position. So I'm thinking about maybe doubling up my rook and my queen against b7, and black again is going to have to do something to respond. Okay, black now castles. So finally, after 12 moves, black has completed development. So work out with me. Okay, how quickly can you complete development? We know that you have to move 2 pawns because each of your bishops, because they can't jump over pieces, is blocked in by pawns of its own colour. So you've got to use 2 moves to move pawns, and generally the central pawns are the most common. Okay, you've got to move both knights out into the board. You've got to move both bishops out into the board, so we're up to 6. You've got to move the queen off the back rank, 7, and you've got to castle. Okay, so it's possible to complete your development in 8 moves. So let's just rewind. So we're up to move 12. Okay. Okay, this is move 5, move 6, move 7, move 8, and then castle, right? So on move 9, all I need to do now is to move my queen. So in 10 moves, I could have completed development. Here, it's taken black 12 moves to complete development, and in the process, he has lost initiative in the game. Okay, so I now move my knight in. So it's just generally improving the knight. This pawn might be weak, and I'm quite happy if black wants to exchange off bishops. He doesn't do that. He pushes a5. Now I lift my rook, and that was the blunder. Okay, so I'm thinking only about my plans, and I forgot. I simply didn't remind myself. You should go over the board on every move. Okay, the knight's only defender is the bishop. Right, and if you talk to yourself out loud, that even helps. Right, the knight's only defender is the bishop, and then you should sanity check every move. Okay, don't release the mouse. Okay, I want to move my rook there. Is there anything? Oh yes, there is. Yeah, it would leave my knight hanging. Right, but as it happens, I go there. Black captures my knight, and suddenly I'm a piece down. But see how the game evolves from this point. Because although I'm down in material, which is one kind of imbalance and one kind of weakness, right? I am still ahead in initiative. So I move my rook across. So now I've got a rook lined up with an undefended bishop and with black's king. Okay, so we won't take too long over the rest of the game, but I want you to get a feel of the flow and a feel of how comfortable you would feel with the white pieces at this point compared to how comfortable you would feel with the black pieces. Queen recaptures the bishop. Pawn push, so clearly there's a threat here of pawn to c4 with a fork against these two pieces. So I can't have that. So I retire my rook back to b1. We swap off light squared bishops now. Okay. Yeah, I can kind of see what Black's thinking about. Black's thinking, oh, I'm up a knight at this point, so trades will be in my interest. And yes, from a purely material point of view, then trades will be in your interest, because if you can keep doing that and simplifying the game, then that will probably lead to a dominating advantage when you get to the ending. However, it's not the only kind of imbalance in the game, because this bishop is actually doing a very important job in defense over here. Am I going to voluntarily trade bishops? If I take there, he's going to recapture with the f-pawn and give himself a semi-open file with a rook. I don't think, being a piece down, that I would want to be doing that. Okay, but Black kind of flinches first and grabs my bishop. So I capture with the pawn. So this gives me options of maybe pawn push if pawn takes, and I've still got a lovely pawn centre, and Black's pawns here would be fragmented. Okay, so Black takes a pawn, and I recapture with another pawn into the centre. Remember, this is actually my b pawn, so it's just captured there and there. And now I've got a nice little bit of a shield here, and these pawns are blocked, right? So this middle of the board here is blocked up, it's going nowhere. This is gridlocked, okay? And now, see how the game progresses. Rook comes across. So, the idea is possibly that he's thinking about a back rank mate, okay? And this is a very respectable pattern. So let's say my queen wasn't there, okay? Comes down with check, the only move is rook takes, so he's sacrificed his queen, and then rook takes would be checkmate. Okay, however, my queen is on this diagonal. So, I move my queen up to g5, and it's still on that diagonal. So Black can't force the back rank mate, and this pretty much forces now g6 to be played, because there's the threat of mate in one, because my queen is backed up by my rook. Why is my rook there? My rook's there because I finished development 2 moves before Black did, and I decided to manoeuvre my rook round. It took 3 moves, right? It had to go from there to there to there, and that one was a capture, the middle one, because I blundered a piece. However, look at the advantage that I've got. Okay, so now, Black's just had to push g6, pretty much forced to, and now I come through to blast through with the h-pawn. So I'm threatening to go to h5, that can't take because it's pinned, right? And I'm just going to smash through, okay? So f6 is pushed, no good. I capture with the pawn. Now if knight recaptures, I just grab the knight with my bishop. So he puts a rook there. Now I move my rook across, and I'm quite pleased with this move, because what this is doing, it's saying, no, I'm not going to give up my pawn. I'm going to add a defender to my pawn. So now you've got 2 attackers, 2 defenders, you can't capture. Doesn't make sense. And now also, I've potentially got control over these 2 files. So if I can get these pawns out of the way, that is going to be good for my king. There was no point really on my rook staying on g3, because I'm not about to capture the pawn. Not yet. So I move my rook across to defend the pawn. Now his queen comes in. So what's his queen going to do? Well, it's attacking my rook, and it's attacking this pawn. Now I'm not concerned about this pawn. I'm out for blood at this point in time, right? I feel like I have the upper hand, right? I'm in for the kill. So I'm not concerned about this pawn. This pawn here is going to be 4, so he's got to 1 move to capture the pawn, another move to get out of the way, 6 moves it will take to convert that pawn. So that doesn't bother me. He can have the pawn. Now, one thing I want you to notice as well is this move with the queen down to here. It's moved the queen on the wrong side of this gridlocked island in the middle of the board. Okay, so strategically, black is in hot water around the king's area on the king's side of the board. Yeah, he's in trouble. There should be alarm bells ringing and big red lights going off. Okay, and what he's done is he's decided to have a counter-attack with a lone wolf queen on my queen side. My king's over here, right? And because I've pushed h4, my king has an escape square, so I'm not concerned about getting back ranked here. So why go down there? Especially because it undefends a pawn here, and now I'm attacking his knight. Right? Can you see? Now black is really reeling. Black is getting hit from both sides now. It doesn't know what to do. So rook comes across to defend the knight. And now Harry pushes to h5. Okay, pawn can't capture because of the pin. And now he sacks his rook. He can think of nothing else. Sacks his rook. I grab the rook. Knight takes rook. Queen takes knight. Okay, and now we're in a position where material is roughly equal. I'm one pawn up at this point in time. But black is broken. Black is broken open. Yeah, this queen can gobble up a couple of pawns. That's fine. It's not a problem, right? Because I've got all the initiative. I'm threatening checkmate in one. Okay, so now queen comes in with a check. King to h2. Queen takes h5 with check. King goes back to g1. And now he's threatening, in a slightly dishonourable way, but I've done it before, threatening to turn a lost game into a draw through repetition, but it doesn't work. So I go back to h2, queen comes back here, and now king to g3. And if you notice, these squares are covered by my queen, these squares are covered by my king, all of these, right? And where's the queen going to go? There or there? Not really. So anyway, queen comes across here, so he's hoping to trade off queens. I actually miss the immediate checkmate, because obviously queen to g7 is just mate in one. So I capture his rook, and he sends me a message saying, just play, mate. You got me, and no need to toy with your food, he says at this point in time, which is gracious. So yeah, his only legal move at this point would be to put the queen there, but this is now completely one position. I've got a rook, and black has nothing. And it's all about initiative. This is what I want you to get. So think about, maybe go through one of your own games and think about getting that initiative, and it really does start in the first few moves, and that's why the openings are so important, right? There's a reason why the advice that you get is don't move pieces that you've already moved into the board again, unless you absolutely have to. But also, don't put pieces in a place where they're going to have to move again. As we saw when black moved his knight out to f6, and I could simply kick it with a pawn, right? And from that point, he's already like 2 paces behind me in the game, and he never gets back in front. Even though I did something stupid and blundered a piece, it didn't count. Because black's lack of initiative in the game, he never regained. Okay? And it led to a fun game. I certainly enjoyed myself very much. But I really want you to take that lesson to heart. Don't mess about with your first moves in the game. Get the initiative, get your pieces out into the board, all of them, right? Complete your development as quickly as you can, as close to move 8 as you can. It will work for you. It will win you more games, I guarantee it. So time to get serious about your openings and start to kick ass more when you play chess, yeah? Good luck, yeah? See you soon.